And that something just might change your life and actually make a damn difference in my life.
You're going to want to pay attention to this one.
Hey everybody, David Niggle. You're going to love this episode.
I never thought about this till much later on in my life. But when I was a little kid, I had a lemonade stand that was so successful that I was making more money than any of the other kids that I was around with their allowance. Like I was making like $50 a week, and you're charging, this is in the 70s, you're charging like 15 cents, 20 cents for, a cup of lemonade. But you want to hear the rub on it? I was making too much money, so my mother made me stop. She didn't want me to think that earning money was that easy. Right? How fucked up is that? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. Even when people see, but you have to think of the paradigm behind that, right? If you see somebody, because here was the thing, I think I've mentioned this to you folks before. One of the things that I grew up with was that, what was the idea of a rich person? Like, how did my parents understand wealth? You either had to be brilliant, you had to be extremely talented, or you were a crook. That was it. And if you didn't fit in those categories, it didn't make any sense to them. So one day I realized, well, actually somebody said this to me because I told them this. This is way back when I first started learning. They're like, well, what was your parents' paradigm around it? I'm like, good, let me think about that. What did I hear? You had to be brilliant, you had to be talented, or you had to be a crook. And they said to me, so which one are you? And I'm like, well, shit, they never led me down the road of being brilliant or talented, right? So the unconscious assumption was that you're going to grow up to be a crook if you want to be rich. And I thought to myself, how crazy, because when a person experiences something, even if you take money out of the picture here, right? Because this is where like conspiracy theories come from. If a person keeps experiencing some form of reality, but they don't know how to put the pieces in their mind together correctly, they have to come up with their own conclusion about how it's happening. Money has been that kind of mystery for mankind probably ever since money started. And we found some people had gobs of it, and others couldn't seem to get enough to make it from one day to the next. It just eluded them their whole damn life. So it's so important that we really scour our own thinking for any little piece of twisted information around the idea of money and the cause of money. So let me just state this. There's only one cause that moves money in the world. That's sales. The intention behind it is demand. Supply and demand. But the movement of money, the only thing that moves it is sales. Even if you say, hey, David, like if we were hanging out or something, you said, David, can I borrow $20? And I said, yeah, sure. And I gave you $20. That's a sale. That is a sale. Charity is a sale. All movement of money is due to a sale. What is a sale? One person asking for something in or not in exchange for something else, and they get it. That's all sale is. That's it.
The one thing that I really want to, reiterate here is the first stage of that process, and you mentioned this in the episode itself, is raising your standard. And raising your standard is a huge part of being able to attract those riches to you. Would you share what raising your standard means and maybe what that looked like to you in the beginning and how it's evolved over your several decades in business?
Sure. So the idea of raising your standard was introduced to me in some other form. It wasn't called raising your standard. I actually don't even remember what it was called, but it was about kind of designing your life and your environment. And I realized that because of the way that I was raised, I was tolerating things in my life that I didn't necessarily even like, but from the perspective of being a man and working for someone and raising a family, there were things that I thought that I had to do that were absolutes. Things like cutting your grass, like you mentioned, cutting your grass, right? That was one of the first things I changed, by the way. And I did not know that See, I kind of thought, like, if you're going to be a responsible person, you have to do everything yourself. So if the driveway needed to be fixed, I was digging up the driveway, or if I had to cut the grass or paint the house.
House had to be cleaned.
I spent every freaking weekend. If I wasn't at one of my kids' games, it was repairing something on the house, or cutting the grass, or painting, or changing the oil in your car, like all that kind of stuff. I thought this is what you were supposed to do. And I didn't really like it, but it was like, okay, I can master these things. And it was very important to me, because you got to realize it was just a few years before that nothing was working right. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right and taking responsibility and all this. And as I began to learn, when I realized that there were things in my life that I was tolerating that would never let me get to a higher level in my life, right? You're not going to sit there and do all of these things on the weekend. Like, I could be studying, I could be learning a skill, I could be doing something else, but no, I have to be out there cutting the grass. So I'll never forget, I had a pretty good sized piece of property at that time, and I had a riding lawnmower, right? So I'm cutting the grass and I am listening to something, a book on tape or whatever, while I'm doing this. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that I could be doing something to move my life forward other than cutting the grass. And why was I spending my Saturday afternoon, one of the few days of the week that I actually get off, cutting the grass? I could be with my family, I could be studying something, I could be building a business, I could be doing so many other things. And I was like, I need to raise my standard in this area. I took the lawnmower over to the side of the house, washed it off, got it all nice and clean, took it to the end of the driveway. It had a trailer on it, that was doing
nice setup.
Yeah, doing the whole thing. And I put a sign on it and gave it away. And it was like a $4,000 deal, right? And it wasn't that old. It was actually relatively new, maybe about a year old. And it was another thing that I learned. My mentor was teaching me that when you were done with something, don't sell it, give it away. Take it, that thing that blessed your life, even though you paid for it, and bless somebody else's life with it, because it will come back to you. So I was really getting into practicing these principles. And actually, the idea of giving something away was a standard raise in and of itself. So I put a sign for free. This car pulls up. I went in the house. I was made a sandwich or something. Went in the house. There's a knock at the door. And I go to the door, and it's a husband and wife. And she says to me, she's got the sign in her hand. She says, is this like real? Like, you really giving this away? I said, yeah, I am. What's wrong with it? Like, the husband's like, does it run? I'm like, it's almost brand new. Why are you giving it away? Because I'm not going to cut my grass anymore. I'm going to hire somebody to cut my grass. And the woman started crying. And she said, my son was looking for a way to make money to be able to go to college. And he was thinking about cutting lawns to be able to do that. But we didn't have a way for him to cut lawns. Like, this happened so fast, T, right? So I'm like, it's yours. They got whatever they got to bring it home or whatever, and the kid put himself through college by doing that. He came up with enough money to be able to go to school. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I cannot believe the things that are actually changing by me changing, right? So I want to lift myself up and do something better, but I'm taking the thing and blessing somebody else. So then it became a systematic process of, what is it that I'm tolerating that I need to let go of to step into a higher version of myself? And then that became the process of raising your standards. And then when I started the business, it became literally something that we teach in the seminars and we teach in the private coaching. How do you raise your standards? How do you realize what you're tolerating? How do you break free from getting stuck in a toleration all of your life? Because most people do. They just tolerate things because they think they have to, and then they're stuck there forever.
Yeah. And once you raise that standard, you never go back. I mean, once you raise that standard, it's very, I'm going to turn this into like a car analogy right now. It's like when you get a vehicle for the first time that has that nifty little backup camera.
Yeah.
Once you get in a vehicle that doesn't have a backup camera after that, you're completely lost. You say, screw it, I'm going to run into stuff. I mean, we become so reliant on it, we become so dependent on it that you've raised your standard in that way. Now, I know that's kind of a way to look at it from the actual physical idea of it. But when you talk about it from the mental standpoint of it, it's so powerful. And that story gets me every damn time you tell it. And I never get sick of hearing about it, because when you opened up your awareness to realize you didn't want to do something else, the universe came and knocked on your door, and you threw that, because most people would either sell that or they tolerate it.
Right.
You gave it away and it blessed someone else, and they probably blessed that. And just the threads that come out of that story, it gives me chills thinking about that.
One of the greatest lessons that I learned that kind of brought things together for me was the idea that most people don't know where to start in their own progress. They don't, because they don't know where they are. They don't have a reference as to really understand where they are in their progress, or even in their failure, if that's what it is that they're experiencing. But when you start to understand where you are, the next crucial key is to begin at that place and not try to start someplace that you're not, because that will inevitably lead to a huge setback. If you think about the way the average person lives, if there weren't some kind of a system put in place, most people would backslide very easily. Society in and of itself, the way that it's set up, it does kind of put a pressure on a person to live to some certain standard. If you start off in school, if you go to work, you start to raise a family, there is a pressure in different places to maintain some kind of a standard. What Waddles is pointing out here is that you have to be willing to go beyond that standard yourself, not by the pressure of the thing, but by the desire of wanting to be more. He said the progress of the world is retarded only by those who do not fill their places that they're holding. They belong to a former age and a lower stage or plane of life. Their tendency is toward degeneration. No society could advance if every individual was smaller than his place, because social evolution is guided by the law of physical and mental evolution. In the animal world, evolution is caused by an excess of life. If you really start to think about that, when you start to become bigger than your present place, you will grow. You will see the external realization of that growth. The people, the money, the organizations, everything that is required.